Natural Disaster Apocalypse Chapter 1. There was a somewhat ear-piercing sound, and a rolling shutter door was slowly lowering. Mu Nan watched the rolling shutter door fall to the ground from the rearview mirror of the pickup truck, then pushed the accelerator, and drove away with an empty pickup truck. The warehouse was also empty, and the goods that were originally delivered to the warehouse were all packed into his small space by Mu Nan under the cover of a truck. Mu Nan has a secret. This secret was discovered when he was 16 years old. He has a space, a world that suddenly appeared to him, like another world that exists in the dimension of his mind. He still doesn't know how big the space is, but no matter how many things he puts, the space is never full, but apart from this storage function, his space can't hold any living things. The sudden extra space made Mu Nan flustered and excited for a while. This kind of existence beyond scientific cognition is undoubtedly novel and full of mystery to a young man who is establishing a worldview. I feel that among all living beings, I am very different. However, the desire to explore and excitement quickly subsided, because Mu Nan found that having such a seemingly mysterious space didn't seem to change his life much, except for storing things are a little more convenient. Besides, based on the premise of being public and law-abiding, he can't use this space to bring himself any financial benefits. So slowly, Mu Nan let go of the matter of space, occasionally secretly using space to bring a little convenience to life, and at other times, how he should live or how to live. Until the year Mu Nan graduated from university, his plans for the future of his life were completely shattered by natural disasters one after another, and this seemingly useless space on weekdays became the greatest vitality he had. At the beginning, no one thought that a rainstorm and a smog would reshuffle the whole world. Everyone knows that the air quality is getting worse and worse these years. Everyone shouts the slogan of protecting the environment and protecting the earth. But everyone is also wasting various resources. The smog came suddenly, except for more and more people wearing masks on the street, everyone's life was not affected much. Later, more and more people got sick, coughing and fever, red and swollen skin, bloodshot eyes, and finally the lungs swelled and it was difficult to breathe until death. More and more people are dying from the same symptoms, not only in China, but also in almost all countries where smog has started. Even if we know that the root of this epidemic is smog, but manpower can be invested in it, except for constant little can be done to save the lives that are dying. The infection rate of lung swelling caused by smog is not high, but the death rate is extremely high. This can be regarded as the beginning of a huge death chapter for the end of the world. There are too many people who are sick, so many that the entire medical system directly collapses. There is no support from various countries and cities, because they are all too busy to take care of themselves. That chaos is just the beginning of the end of the world. At that time, Mu Nan never thought that the world would be completely chaotic one day. He believed in the power of the country, and he also believed in the daily cheering calls on TV and the internet. The disaster will always pass. The most important thing is that he, who was alone, did not deeply understand the pain of the lost relatives in this disaster. Even though these disasters were very close to him, they were still far away from him. Mu Nan is a full-time painter. Because he likes to draw, he has decided on his future life direction since high school. In terms of painting, Mu Nan does have a very good talent. Turned to a career that could afford his livelihood. Before college, he even sold a figure drawing for 50,000 to 60,000 yuan, which was considered a considerable profit in their circle of painters. It is precisely because of his occupation with the property of living in a house that he was not affected much even if he stayed behind closed doors during the entire smog. It is also because of this occupation that he has long been used to cooking some delicious food. The things he wants are stored in his space, so that he can take them whenever he wants. His space is a constant existence, what things look like when they are put in, and what they are still like when they are taken out. After several years of accumulation, the amount of food in Mu Nan's space is quite considerable, because he never felt the crisis of food at the beginning, which led to Mu Nan's death from the killing intent brought by the food. After the smog in the previous life gradually dissipated, people's lives seemed to be slowly returning to normal. Many survivors regarded the depressing and death-surrounded rest of their lives as a chat after dinner, but they didn't want to. The more difficult the future is coming towards mankind. Not long after the smog dissipated, the weather became extremely hot. Even due to the terrain, the hottest place in the country has never been higher than 50 degrees, but this summer, the temperature has reached the highest ever in the world, even as high as 50 degrees. 9 degrees. What is the concept of 59 degrees? The highest temperature in the African desert is only 55 degrees. In places where humans live, the highest temperature does not exceed 45 degrees. The 4 seasons in their country are very distinct, but this year, until December, the high temperature remained high, and the number of people who died from the heat was no less than that of those who died of illness in the smog. People have realized at this time, maybe this time, the end is really coming. Later, the government of each region was directly controlled by the military, who counted the number of people and issued new ID cards. Even if the people followed the country's footsteps, they still couldn't withstand the continuous advent of natural disasters. The 2 words are no longer hope, but deeper, unknown despair. Mu Nan who has space is much better than many people. No matter what the situation is, he can at least have food to fill his stomach. It is a pity that he has warded off natural disasters, but he has not resisted man-made disasters. Just because of a moment of soft-heartedness, he gave a skinny little girl a little cornbread, which caused her death. At that time, the country was leading the masses to rebuild their homes. Although it cannot be said that everyone can have enough to eat, there was no famine to the point of killing people for a little food. Otherwise, no matter how naive Mu Nan was, he would not have softened his heart at that moment. Looking back on the feeling before he died, Mu Nan would still feel a dull pain where he was stabbed at the beginning. He had space, but he died so aggrieved in the end. When she opened her eyes again, Mu Nan was reborn and returned to 3 months before the end of the world. After being reborn, Mu Nan had to reflect on that short life, because he had a life-saving trump card that no one else had. Facing such an apocalyptic world, even though he was cautious, he also felt an undetectable contempt in his heart. Food is not difficult, so he failed to feel the cruelty of the end times more intuitively and deeply than others. Whether it is death or hunger, even though he is in it, he has never personally experienced it. There is an essential difference between a doomsday struggle with confidence in his heart and a doomsday struggle without confidence. Even though his parents died early, the environment he lives in has always been very simple, and faced the end of the world directly before they had time to experience a lot of ups and downs in society. Thinking of all the things in her previous life, Mu Nan didn't feel that she had anything to regret, but there were some regrets after all. After returning the truck, on the way back, Mu Nan packed several servings of pork rib powder. This is an old shop that has been around for decades, and it still retains its original taste. When the smog cleared, this shop never opened again. Passed through the door, so Mu Nan would buy a lot every time he passed by, and he had already stocked up a lot in the space, but in the future, he would eat less and less. Mu Nan lives in an old house now, and it was also the first group of civilian houses with elevators built in the city planning. He lives on the 17th floor, the highest is 23, and the floors are not bad. He has lived here since he was a child, but now he is the only one left in a family of 3. Looking at the group photo of his parents with a lot of dust on the wall, Mu Nan sometimes thinks that maybe it is luck that his parents passed away early, at least they have not been tortured by the end of the world. Putting down his backpack, Mu Nan took a set of clean clothes and took a shower, washing away the fatigue and dust from a day of traveling outside, and after wiping his hair until it was half dry, he sat down to eat refreshed. The rice was cooked by himself, and the dishes were bought outside before, and he secretly put them into the space, and now they are still steaming when they are taken out. Mu Nan doesn't know how to cook. Before the apocalypse, he lived on takeaway food. After the apocalypse, he didn't have the conditions to cook. But since his rebirth, he has been good at cooking. As long as he is at home, he will start cooking all kinds of dishes and cook them well. Just put it in the space, there should be no conditions to fire for a long time in the future, so before that, Mu Nan should store more ready-made food. It has been 3 months since Mu Nan was reborn. He has already hoarded those necessities for survival. He even bought some lethal weapons at a high price for safety. Naturally, don't think about pistols. He has the time and space to smuggle in, but without that channel, even if he goes abroad, he can't just buy it casually. At present, Mu Nan is already very content. At least this time, he won't be stuck in the room again. Hit the knife without the power to fight back. Natural Disaster Apocalypse Chapter 2. In the past few months, Nan has spent a lot of money and spent all his savings in the past few years. Fortunately, he has space and convenient transportation. For some large quantities of food, he can go directly to the original place. Buying from the place of origin can save a lot of money by reducing transportation costs, but no matter how much you save, the money is still not enough. Facing the known future, no amount of preparation is too much. In order to facilitate receiving goods, Nan specially rented a small warehouse, and hired a retired teacher, $3,000 a month, just visit the warehouse during the day to help him receive goods, and he will come over at night, pretending to be the goods pack everything into space. Today is the last batch, and the lease of the warehouse has also expired, so he can express the remaining items that are too fragmentary to his home. Nan, who had eaten, settled the wages by transferring money to the janitor's teacher with his mobile phone, and then went out to the leasing company to return the key and get back the deposit. On the way back, he passed by a supermarket. Looking at the money in his hand, Nan went to wandered around the supermarket. Although I have almost bought everything that should be bought, the money in the future is not even as good as waste paper, so I can buy a little while I can still spend at normal prices. Nan's own money has actually been spent long ago, and what he spends now is sent back by Qin Huai every year. Qin Huai, the person who had been integrated into his life unknowingly for a long time, but then left. He and Qin Huai grew up together. Qin Huai was 2 years older than him. When his parents passed away, he was still young and had no autonomy. Send someone under the fence. Although the conditions of his family can only be regarded as well-off, his parents dote on him very much and almost respond to his needs, which has also cultivated his arrogant temperament. He would rather live at home alone and take care of himself than live in a house. Someone else's home. What's more, even though he lost his parents, Qin Huai is still here. To him, his home is still there, so he can't leave him at all. Fortunately, his relatives didn't think much about adopting him. Although his parents had accident compensation and insurance compensation, the combined sum was quite a lot, which would allow him to finish his studies without worrying about food and clothing, and even have a surplus. It's a problem after all. In the end, under Nan's stubborn fuss, the relatives chose a compromise. He was adopted in name, but he still lives in his own house, and the neighbor across the door, Qin Huai's grandmother, helps to take care of him. Anyway, since childhood, Nan almost grew up in Qin Huai's house, and that relative's house didn't live well either. It's far away, about 10 minutes away, just visit once in a while. He was 10 years old that year. For some adults, 10 years old may be a child who cannot be separated from others, but for a child who has encountered a great change, it is definitely possible to take care of himself, let alone take care of himself. And it's not that he has no one to rely on, besides his parents, he also has Qin Huai. Qin Huai's grandmother passed away when he was 15 years old. She was too old and passed away very peacefully. At that year, Qin Huai, who was just 17 years old, became an orphan just like him, but they had each other. Qin Huai said that from now on, they will depend on each other. At that time, Nan didn't have much fear of the future. Although her grandmother was gone, they had each other. However, it didn't take long before Qin Huai's father, whom he had only seen in photos, found him and took Qin Huai away forcefully. After leaving, Nan never saw Qin Huai again in his last life until his death. Qin Huai's father should be quite rich and settled abroad. At the beginning, under his crying, Qin Huai told him that he would not leave. He never pretended that this so-called father did not exist. But later, Qin Huai, who was determined not to leave, still left. No matter how stubbornly 2 underage children were to live with an adult, there was no other way but to compromise. But at that time, Nan couldn't understand and couldn't accept it, and was only filled with the betrayal of Qin Huai leaving. At first, Nan could only resist Qin Huai's departure with a resolute attitude and the toughness of breaking off diplomatic relations, with a trace of self-esteem that was stabbed by betrayal even if he bowed his head to beg, but the ultimate goal was to hope that Qin Huai could come back. He couldn't understand why Qin Huai could easily let Qin Huai leave with him who hadn't even shown his face once in more than 10 years. Especially when some neighbors casually said that blood relationship is blood relationship, it was like stabbing a knife in his heart. Facing the empty house, Munan felt deeply for the first time at that time that he was really an orphan, with no father, no mother, no one to rely on. Not only the house was empty, but also the heart. So much so that for a long time, he closed himself off, retaliated against Qin Huai's betrayal by stripping himself from Qin Huai's world, and even chose a boarding high school far away from here, as if he wanted to leave everything here and follow Qin Huai has nothing to do with it anymore. However, the most fundamental reason for all this is that he used the most naive method, hoping that Qin Huai would come back. These resolutions are only used by him to avoid the bewilderment of bearing the future alone, and the panic and fear of losing Qin Huai. Growing up, Munan gradually understood Qin Huai's helplessness back then. He believed that Qin Huai would never leave with his father if he could, but life is like this, and you can't do whatever you want. But Munan's understanding does not mean that this frozen relationship will recover. On the contrary, he is even more afraid to contact Qin Huai. In that strange country, Qin Huai's new life, new friends, and everything new have nothing to do with him. Maybe Qin Huai has already started his new life, successful, loved, sought after. What's more, he may regain a close friend who can replace him. Only he himself is still living in the past. He thought they still had a lot of time, and thought that one day he would be able to muster up the courage to face things that were no longer the same as in his memory. Maybe they would become strangers, and even like many adults, with a trace of reminiscence, he talked lightly and calmly. Looking at Qin Huai in the past, Munan thought, when one day he can accept a Qin Huai who has nothing to do with him and is just a former neighbor, it should be the time when he has the courage to contact Qin Huai again. It's just that in his previous life, he didn't have this courage until his death. Although Qin Huai left, he would send Munan living expenses every month, including the annual tuition fee, but this money Munan never touched in his last life, and the compensation after his parents died was enough for him to finish college. He didn't know where Qin Huai's money came from, whether it was earned by himself or given by his father. No matter whether it was the former or the latter, he didn't want to use it. But this time, Munan spent all the money. He thought, maybe when Qin Huai saw that his account was empty, he would be worried about what happened to him. Come back and have a look. It is Qin Huai who is looking for him very much. It's easy because he's here and never left, but it's hard for him to find Qin Huai because he doesn't know where Qin Huai is now. At the beginning, he was the one who cut off contact with Qin Huai forcefully, but Qin Huai sent him living expenses every month, giving him the illusion that Qin Huai still kept in touch with him. Can find each other. It wasn't until he took the initiative to look for Qin Huai after his rebirth that he found that there was no one for a remittance account, not to mention that the remittance account was a foreign trust fund. After being reborn, Munan, who couldn't find Qin Huai, panicked. He searched everywhere for anyone who could contact Qin Huai, but most of them lost contact during the years of breaking off relations. There was only one who hadn't moved yet. Jiang Xian. After being reborn, Munan went to find Jiang Xian, but unfortunately Jiang Xian said that he hadn't contacted Qin Huai for a long time, and the online account he used to contact had long been lost, and he didn't know where Qin Huai was. Until now, Munan is still looking for Qin Huai while hoarding goods. He deeply suppresses the panic that he may never find Qin Huai in this life, and tries to keep calm and prepare for the end of the future. What will happen to him if he never sees Qin Huai again? Maybe he will collapse even more than he thought. Looking at the card handed back by the cashier, this card is the living expenses given by Qin Huai, and the last sum of money in it was completely spent today, and the big and small bags were brought home, and Munan sorted them out little by little. While thinking about what else needs to be added, he habitually opened the contact group from a long time ago, but unfortunately it was quiet inside, and all his inquiries did not respond. In the early morning of the next day, a worker knocked on the door. Munan specially customized hollow and thickened tempered glass, intending to replace everything in the house with new ones. When staying at home because of the smog in the previous life, these leaky doors and windows did make him worry and fear for a while, so this time, he took precautions early. In addition to changing the glass, Munan also specially replaced the air conditioner at home. The air conditioner was specially customized by him when flying abroad. It is installed in a plant in a high-temperature working environment, so the model is so large that it cannot be installed at home. However, in some foreign places where the temperature is hot and hot all the year round, this high-temperature technology is widely used in homes. Although the price is much more expensive than that in China, it is better than small size and easy installation. He ordered 2 high-temperature resistant household air conditioners, installed one at home, and put it in a space for future use if needed. In the last life, when the smog dissipated and the scorching heat hit, almost all household air conditioners went on strike. The country temporarily set up a number of summer resorts, but there were too many people. Even the summer resorts had air conditioners, but with little effect. Back then Mu Nan stayed at home, the weather was too hot and the air conditioner couldn't be used, but there was water in his space, and he survived the first tormenting summer heat by relying on the water stored in the space. This time I have experience, and I have made enough preparations, so I won't live in a more embarrassing life than in my previous life. When the windows were demolished at home, Mu Nan lived next door, which was Qin Huai's house. Although Qin Huai didn't come back, Mu Nan never left. At least once a month, he would hire a part-time worker to do a general cleaning. Now that he couldn't live in his own home, he simply packed up and lived here. Before, Mu Nan thought about whether to sell her house and live in Qin Huai's house, but after thinking about it, it's okay, they live opposite each other, so no matter who they sell to, they may accidentally reveal some secrets and it's fine to sell the house and leave, but living so close, if there are some disputes over the house after the end of the world, it's really not worth it. It's better to close the big iron gate outside and live quietly by yourself. When the staff were changing the windows, Mu Nan carefully supervised the work and told them to seal it well. He didn't live here for long in his last life. Compared with the refuge bases established by the government, some private refuges were opened earlier. You only need to pay a little food, and you can have a settlement that can escape the heat and cold. At that time, many people in their community were moved. In fact, Mu Nan was not moved at first. Later, it was because of an earthquake. Although it was considered a small aftershock when it reached here, many houses still collapsed. Fortunately, nothing happened where he was, but there was no way to prevent another earthquake in the future. And during that time, water and electricity cuts were too frequent here. Once, the electricity came on for a few hours for nearly a week, and the water stopped for several days. It was too difficult to cut off power and water on such a hot day. A private refuge base, among other things, can maintain power supply for at least a few hours a day. Mu Nan thought, he has space, no matter where he is, he will never starve to death, and there were quite a few people who decided to go together at that time, so Mu Nan followed along. Not to mention how many losses he suffered in that kind of private base, the more reason why Mu Nan chose to stay this time is that he wanted to wait. He was afraid of Qin Huai's change, but he instinctively believed that the Qin Huai he knew would always be with him. It won't change. This kind of contradictory psychology is very complicated, but no matter what, this time he wants to stay at home and wait a little longer. Natural Disaster Apocalypse Chapter 3. It took almost a week for Mu Nan to replace all the doors and windows in the house. His house and Qin Huai's house lived opposite each other, and a security door was specially installed outside facing the corridor, and the two families shared a security door. However, the anti-theft door is a bit old. After all, it has been more than 10 years. This time, Mu Nan replaced the anti-theft door with a high-quality one, which cost a lot of money. In order to make it easier for people to install doors and windows, Mu Nan put all the furniture in the house into the space in advance. After all the doors and windows were installed, Mu Nan directly changed the layout of the house a little bit. The layout of his house is very simple. 1 bedroom, 1 living room, 1 kitchen and 1 bathroom. Mu Nan left both rooms empty, and later planned to get vegetable pots and soil, and grow vegetables at home. Although the space can be stored and kept fresh, it is still idle after being closed at home. In the living room, he didn't put a sofa, but put a bed directly. He didn't want a TV coffee table, so he just set up a table, which is enough for a computer and meals. Because the balcony was closed, Mu Nan directly made some cabinets on the balcony. Some of his clothes and quilts were placed in the space, and some were placed on the balcony. He also tidied up Qin Huai's house. Although the doors and windows were not changed, Qin Huai's house didn't have much furniture. He piled them all up in one room. Mu Nan also planned to use the spare room and living room. Come grow vegetables. As for if Qin Huai came back in the future, as long as he could come back, he would not have to worry about having no place to live. When the houses on both sides were almost rectified and the vegetables were planted, Mu Nan even raised a few chickens on the balcony of Qin Huai's house. The house was tossed like this, and it was probably off. Thinking of Qin Huai's angry appearance, Mu Nan laughed, but after laughing, he felt a little uncomfortable. The scariest thing is not that there is no hope, but that hope and expectation will eventually come to nothing. Before the smog came, there was a period of torrential rain. Mu Nan still remembered that the torrential rain lasted for a long time, causing many places to be flooded. At this time in his last life, he was finishing the project. I need to go to and from school, and I get wet every day, making the house damp, and I feel sticky and uncomfortable when I sleep. This time, the dehumidifier is on 24 hours a day, and there is no need to be busy. You don't have to go out. You sit in a dry room, listening to the sound of rain outside, leaning on the bed and holding the computer to watch movies. Shopping online, although it is raining heavily, there is still a period of time before the smog comes. The operation of express delivery is still normal, and things can still be purchased normally. There are 2 alumni groups hanging on the small window of the computer, one from a junior high school and one from a university. The junior high school alumni group is quiet, but the university alumni group is very lively. Because of the bad weather and it happened to be during the graduation period, the students complained a lot. Because Mu Nan didn't live on campus, his relationship with his classmates was relatively normal. Since high school, he has basically been alone, isn't it? He didn't want to blend in with others, but when he finally got out of the influence of Qin Huai's departure, he was already used to being alone. Accustomed to quietly watching others lively. A female classmate in the group was complaining about the terrible weather, saying that her little nephew had a cold and cough, and the cough had not healed for more than a week, and his body was swollen and painful. He had to go to the hospital for injections every day, and sometimes her brother-in-law was too busy, and asked her to help take it to the hospital. I was very busy doing the final project, and I encountered this kind of difficult weather to go out, tormenting both adults and sick children. Some people suggested that it is better to do a hospitalization directly and live in the hospital, so as not to run between the 2 ends of the family hospital. The adults are fine, and the children suffer. The classmate said that although the family thinks the same way, there are too many people who are sick recently. Most of them have a cold and fever, and some of them have severe fever, and they are unconscious. It is too difficult to wait for a bed, so they can only be wrapped up every day, strictly run at both ends. Looking at the content of their chat, Mu Nan couldn't help being surprised. The symptoms the girl mentioned were exactly the same as those caused by smog. It started with a fever and cough, and then her body swelled and ached. Finally, the entire lung swelled. When the lung started to swell, it was basically hopeless. In the last life, the root cause of the epidemic was found. It was a kind of poisonous mycelium floating in the smog. It was so small that it was invisible to the naked eye. It was easy to be inhaled by people and then infected. But he always thought that the mycelium was accompanied by the smog. Appeared, if someone has already been infected, then maybe the air is already carrying this kind of toxic mycelium. Thinking of this possibility, Mu Nan couldn't help feeling a little flustered. Although he had already prepared what he needed to do, and he had done enough psychological preparation for the future, but when the disaster really struck again, he still had nothing to do. Accept calmly. Mu Nan saw that the group quickly turned from sick children to complaining about the weather, and couldn't help typing a paragraph in the group. It is said that there is an unknown infectious disease spreading recently. Everyone can stay indoors if they don't go out. If you have to go out, you must wear a mask for protection, and store more food at home to be prepared. Mu Nan had hardly spoken in the group. When he made a noise, the hot chat group fell silent for a while, and some people began to tentatively ask Mu Nan if he had any more inside information. It's no wonder they asked more. It's because there have been so many people getting sick recently, which makes people feel a little flustered. It's a pity that no matter how many things Mu Nan can't say, he is just an ordinary person with selfish attributes. The only time he went to the police station in his life was because of his parents' accident. He didn't have the courage and consciousness to be the savior of the world. As for whether others take what he said to heart, he just doesn't care too much. Everyone has their own destiny. With the sound of ding, Moo-nan glanced at the download interface. The few TV dramas he selected were downloaded, and then Moo-nan found some TV dramas, movies and variety shows and put them in the download list to wait for download. For this reason, Moo-nan specially bought more than a dozen mobile hard drives with the largest capacity. In addition to various entertainment items, he also downloaded a lot of materials and books. Those materials range from how to make soap and candles to how to build a house, etc. All the things he thought of that were useful for survival skills were downloaded and classified. Fortunately, the internet will not be interrupted before the big earthquake, so he still has a lot of time, so don't worry. Although the network was slowly restored after the earthquake, it was a local area network, which can only be used in a specific area, and cannot connect to the cloud network at all. Although Moo-nan is not a dead star without the network, but prepare as much as possible if you have time, several hard disks are placed in the space without taking up space. Looking at the heavy rain outside, Moo-nan took out his mobile phone and ordered a takeaway. There was a barbecue restaurant whose barbecue taste was very good, the meat was very fresh and the ingredients were abundant, but the stall was small, and they had to take it away or order takeaway. Now with such heavy rain, we can only take out. Moo-nan ordered a lot in one breath, and then got up from the bed to take a shower. The weather is already a little hot, and some families who are afraid of heat turn on the air conditioner early. Fortunately, Moo-nan is not so afraid of heat, and there is not much need to go out, and an electric fan squatting at home is almost enough, otherwise the air conditioner he bought is still running with a little bit of power. While taking a shower, Moo-nan looked at his glasses and poked his own face. Because of his occupation, he always stays at home, so although his skin is fair, it looks a bit unhealthy white. It seems that exercise should be done quickly. After a while, I pulled my hair which was too long, and planned to go downstairs to have my hair cut tomorrow after the rain has subsided a little. He thought that the disease was caused by the smog after the rain stopped, so he originally planned to get a haircut before the rain stopped and never go out again. But now things are a little bit beyond his expectations, but even if there is already smog now, the relationship with the rain should not be as serious as later, so it shouldn't be a big deal to go downstairs for a haircut after wearing a mask. At this time in the last life, he was unprotected and ran to school every day without any accident. Just be careful. Although the place he lives in is an elevator room, it is considered an old community. There is an old shop in the community where you can get a haircut for 10 or 15 yuan. It is even under their building. You can pass through the canteen directly, and you don't need to get in the rain at all. Although there is no shape to speak of, but after the air outside is worse and the smog is bigger, you can't go out for a long time, so I simply cut it short to avoid it is dangerous to go far and stay outside for a long time. The owner of the barber shop is also an old neighbor here. If his parents were still alive, they would probably be familiar with him, but Moo-nan has been outside for a long time. In fact, he is only familiar with some old neighbors here, and he can't even pronounce their names. The uncle who cut his hair also persuaded Moo-nan to go to the barber shop outside for styling when the rain stopped. He can only cut it short here. It would be a pity not to have a styling for this handsome young man. Moo-nan smiled, just try to cut it as short as possible for me. My hair is too long and I'm so hot. I have a pretty face. What style do I want? The uncle was amused by his words, and chatted about homework, saying that his father used to come to him for a haircut every few months, and every time he cut his hair, he would talk about how cute and smart his son was. The first graders were all wearing red scarves and bars, and they sighed. If Lao Mu was still there, he would not be so proud of his son. Moo-nan listened quietly, and occasionally responded with a smile. Although many years had passed, in the mouths of these old neighbors, his parents seemed to be there all the time. She cut her hair, and Moo-nan didn't wash it in the store. Anyway, she went upstairs and got home. After returning home, she can even take a bath and wash it together. Before leaving, Moo-nan reminded the uncle to buy some masks and disinfectants. It seems to have the flu, which is very contagious. The uncle agreed with a smile, and Moo-nan didn't say anything more. He put on his mask and went home. While waiting for the elevator on the other side came down, but a young couple came out, holding each other in their arms. A child wrapped in a raincoat walked out anxiously. Nan sideways avoided the wall, did not go up the elevator that had already come down on the other side, and continued to wait on the spot. Those things he knew, but he couldn't remind everyone before the matter was too serious. It's pretty weak, it's not easy to be a pioneer and a whistleblower, and it's not like if you do it, things will develop as you want. In the end, he is just a small person who is struggling to survive. After returning home, Nan went directly into the bathroom, threw the worn clothes into the washing machine, put in the laundry detergent and disinfectant, and took a shower from head to toe. The freshly cut hair felt a little rough to the touch, but it really made me feel a little relieved. After changing into comfortable clothes, Nan went to the opposite room and inspected around, looking at the growth of those dishes. However, Kai Yangzi just fell to the ground, and it can't grow so fast. I made sure that the doors and windows in the house are all right, and no rainwater has entered, and cleaned up the balcony. After all, there are chickens, which are somewhat dirty. The balcony was cleaned and food was given again. After drinking water, Nan went home, and then lay on the bed while sorting out the files he had downloaded, and flicking movies at the same time. Recently, Nan has become a bit obsessed with disaster movies. He has almost revisited many old movies, and sometimes he can sum up some experience from some disaster movies. Although it is a movie, art comes from life, and we can learn from it something. For dinner, I ate a bowl of gnocchi casually. Eating alone is inevitably a little simpler. I just want to save my stomach. It rang. Nan turned off the alarm clock and got on the treadmill very consciously. Among other things, physical fitness must not be left behind. He can't fatten up at home just because he can't go out. If he is weak, he can only wait to die in the future. Natural Disaster Apocalypse Chapter 4. The torrential rain has been falling for more than 10 days. When the rain became lighter and the sky began to clear up in many places, many people breathed a sigh of relief. If this rainy day does not pass, there will be no dry clothes to wear. Moreover, it rains every day, and the damp in the house is serious, and there is a sticky moisture everywhere. Many people who were unable to go out to work because of the heavy rain also started to get busy again, and their lives seemed to return to normal after the rain stopped. Nan leaned on the bed, looking at the sunlight coming in from the outside, but he was not as relaxed as others. How he wished that when he woke up tomorrow morning, the smog from the previous life would not hit the city, and the sunshine would still be there. Just ordinary flu, all his preparations were in vain. It's a pity that the end of the world is coming, and there is no deviation. When it was still daylight, many workers who got up early realized that something was wrong. The fog was so thick that people couldn't see each other's appearance even if they were a little farther away. But even if they felt strange, these people didn't think about it in other ways. Although the dense fog was a bit heavier, it was not something they had never seen before, so there was no need to be too surprised. When Nan woke up, the room was still dark. He took out his phone and checked the time. It was 9 o'clock in the morning, but he didn't unlock his phone to surf the internet. Instead, he sat by the bed and looked at the curtains without any light coming in. It sank little by little. His family lives on the 17th floor, which is quite high. Looking down from the balcony of his house, it was foggy, and he couldn't see the buildings opposite him, and he couldn't see the small green garden downstairs. As far as he could see, there was a thick fog. The fog is no different from the previous life. Nan carefully checked the doors and windows again, closed the curtains, put on a mask again, went to the next door to take a look, and saw that the chickens on the balcony of Qinhuai's house were still pecking food in good spirits, and then returned home. Nan made a simple breakfast for herself, 1 egg, 2 slices of toast, 2 slices of bacon, and a glass of milk. Although I feel a little depressed, I still have to eat what I should eat, but I may not eat as much as usual. While eating breakfast, he turned on his phone, and several of the usually active groups on his phone were already chatting 999+, and Nan clicked on any of them to discuss the thick fog outside. Someone said with surprise and inexplicable excitement that they had never seen such a thick fog when they grew up, which was a bit exciting. Some people are lamenting that this year is really too difficult. First, it was raining heavily and it was hard to go out. It finally cleared up one day. Looking at the strange thick fog, they dare not go out even more. They don't have anything to eat if they don't go to work. There are also people taking real photos outside, shooting dense fog and some car accidents caused by dense fog, and then posting them to various online platforms to earn clicks. Moonan quit those chat groups, looked at Weibo, and the topic of dense fog has become the most popular topic, not only in their city, but also in many cities at the same time, even in many foreign countries. If the area of fog is only in a single area, it can also be said to be caused by the climate, but it can be found both at home and abroad, so this is a big problem. However, some official microblogs did not say too much, but only reminded people to pay attention to safety when traveling, and try not to go out if they cannot go out. Due to the thick fog blocking the line of sight, many car accidents have been caused in various places. Moonan sat on the bed in a daze for a while, and the light of the purifiers at home gradually changed from red to blue. He didn't know if these air purifiers were useful, but he felt that turning them on like this would make people feel more at ease. After sitting for a while, Moonan started to find something to do for himself. The smog lasted for a long time. It is impossible for him to stay at home for a long time without doing anything. There are still a lot of ingredients in his space, which can be slowly made into finished products. He didn't have time to do it before, he just bought the corresponding equipment, but now he can follow the tutorial to make some dried meat and other foods that are convenient to eat and can replenish energy. When preparing to make jerky, Moonan noticed a mountain of Chinese cabbage piled up in a corner, which he specially went to the production area to buy. In order to collect these cabbages, it was a bit of a struggle at that time. When he was about to collect Chinese cabbage, Moonan had already planned to make kimchi, but he was busy shopping everywhere and didn't have time to make it. Now that he saw it, he naturally remembered his kimchi plan. I searched for a kimchi box I bought a long time ago. After taking out all the ingredients, I played a movie and started making kimchi while listening to the background sound of the computer. Making kimchi is a labor-intensive job, and he doesn't have any exclusive secret recipes. The taste he made according to the tutorials on the internet is quite good. He likes spicy food, so he gave a lot of chili peppers. Looking at the boxes of red and white kimchi, Moonan, who has been busy for almost a day, still has a sense of accomplishment. Because space and time are constant, Moonan piled the kimchi in the kitchen, intending to store it for a few days, and then put it in the space after being well marinated by time. She was busy until it was almost 6 o'clock before Moonan cleaned up the house, opened the curtains and took a look outside. It used to be bright at 6 o'clock in the past, and there was still sunset at 6 o'clock in summer, but now the outside you can't see the black fingers. When Moonan heard someone on their floor come back from the outside, the house was too quiet, so he would amplify the sound from the outside. Sometimes he could even hear the sound of other people's cooking in the living room. Although this kind of quietness is already normal for Moonan, at this special moment, he still can't help but feel a sense of loneliness. Looking at the computer that doesn't know when the playback will end, Moonan finds out although the old variety show was several years ago, the number of episodes is long and noisy, which can more or less dispel the loneliness of some lonely families. After dinner, I rested for a while, watched the show, watched the hot chat groups, and discussed the topic of smog on the internet. In addition, the pneumonia epidemic did not seem to have spread yet. Watching other people ignorant, some complain that they have to go to work in this weird weather, some are glad that they can rest at home in this smoggy day, and some in the alumni group are crying and complaining that they are trapped in school because of rushing to finish, lonely in the dormitory. Fear. Moonan doesn't know how long the current peace can last, it really is one day less. I don't want to immerse myself in other people's complaints. Some news can be infected and irritating if I read too much, so Moonan put on headphones and played music and got on the treadmill. When I was tired from running, I didn't dream at night. Dawn. Before the smog cleared the next day, many people realized that something was wrong. The most news was the traffic inconvenience caused by the thick smog, but no explanation was given for the source of the thick smog. Bricks who have always talked a lot, this time there is no one who speaks out. In addition, some foreign situations that I could see yesterday can't be checked now. It is said that some internet police have begun to clear the internet. Inciting remarks were blocked, and even his WeChat group seemed to be missing a few, probably because someone posted some inappropriate remarks and the group was blocked. Fortunately, Mu Nan's alumni group is still there, but everyone is a lot more careful in what they say, and try to avoid some sensitive topics. Someone posted some results of today's battle in the group. Seeing that the thick fog hadn't cleared in the morning, they went to the supermarket with their family to buy some goods. They almost couldn't fit in the car. When they got home, they put them out. The scene was still quite spectacular. Some people are complaining that the parents who usually need to give up their seats on the bus are like fighter jets in the supermarket today. Those who are full of combat power, even young people will shy away from them, and those who are rampant are not afraid that an old bone will fall apart. People are saying some doomsday words on the internet, but in fact, few people really believe it, but even if they do believe it, not many people dare to put all their eggs in one basket to stock up now. The news is still shouting, saying that the national inventory is sufficient, and I hope everyone will not blindly follow the trend to stock up on goods. In order to show the authenticity of this statement, many videos of shopping malls buying goods have been released, indicating that the supply of goods is sufficient, and everyone should not panic. And many popular products in the supermarket, after the shelves are empty, new ones are quickly placed on the shelves, which really reassures some panic-stricken people who want to stock up more. However, what Mu Nan noticed was not the shelves, but some of the staff in the photos. Even though those people are not wearing protective clothing, they are wearing masks and face shields. It seems that the country should be preparing policies to deal with pneumonia. It's just that when things haven't exploded on a large scale, no one probably thought that things would become so serious. Some people go over the wall to see the situation in foreign countries. The situation in foreign countries is much more serious than in China. The national power of their country is still very strong, and the binding force on the people is obviously stronger than that in foreign countries. In foreign countries, people pay more attention to their own human rights, especially if there is no arms control. It is a mess. It is said that a large number of passengers were stranded at the airport of a country because of this strange thick fog. Some people saw the situation around the world on the internet and thought it was the end of the world. All kinds of troublemakers wanted to go home, and finally lost control of their emotions and opened fire in public. Guns, indiscriminate shooting, causing more than a dozen casualties. Under this news, many netizens still lament that it has nothing to do with them. Foreigners are prone to lose control of their emotions. I lamented the safety of the country's gun control, lamented that others have never seen the world, and I was scared to death by a little thick fog. There is no shortage of gloating superiority in my words. Mu Nan sighed silently, then closed the news page, opened the notepad, checked for omissions and filled in the gaps, and made a plan for the things he planned to do tomorrow. The disaster is approaching, and everything is clearly prepared, but there was still a sense of urgency that made Mu Nan tense unconsciously. Mu Nan was woken up in the middle of the night by the sound of an ambulance. Now the ambulance still has a warning sound. Unlike later, it is not allowed to make a sound. An old man in their building was sent to the ambulance. Mu Nan remembered the thing, it was at this time in the last life, I was sent to rescue an old man in the middle of the night. It is said that it was an 80-year-old father who started coughing 2 days ago. I am old, and I have a household oxygen at home, so I can wait until the ambulance arrives. However, it was useless to send him to the hospital for first aid, because the old man never came back, and this was also the first old man to leave their community. Natural Disaster Apocalypse Chapter 5. On the third day, the fog in the sky still did not dissipate, and the color of the sky could not be seen clearly. At noon, street lights were still turned on to illuminate the road. People's adaptability is very strong. After the initial panic, many people have calmed down now. The smog persists, but they still have to eat, work and school, and there is no way to stop. Although the smog is heavy, you can travel normally if you slow down on the road. Some people think that this kind of air looks very dirty, and they don't need to be reminded to wear a mask when they go out, but many older generations have no concept of wearing a mask at all. They think that no matter how dirty and dusty it is, it's still air. Don't people breathe air? Are you dead? Mu Nan even saw someone posting photos on the internet. At this time, Some parents did not listen to the government's advice to stay at home, and ran out early to exercise in the fog. For this point, Mu Nan is really a little hard to understand. Whether this exercise is for health preservation or death, even if they don't know the disease brought by the smog, but this kind of abnormal weather, ordinary people can get away without going out. Try not to go out. The air quality has dropped to an unprecedented low level, and at the same time, there has been a rush to buy masks. He saw that many people in the alumni group said that they are not willing to use domestic masks, and feel that domestic masks are cut corners and are useless. I would rather spend more money to find a purchasing agent to buy it from abroad. Mu Nan doesn't know if these people who are disgusted now will be able to buy masks in the future, and if they can't buy masks, will they regret their dislike now? The disease of lung swelling exploded on the internet on the third day of the smog. It was a mother who posted a video, begging the masses for help. Her child was sick, had a fever and a cough, and has already started to have difficulty breathing. But the hospital has no beds, not to mention that they can't even get treatment, and if they don't get treatment, her child will die. In the video, the hospital is overcrowded, and there are heads everywhere. Some people even lie on the ground to get an injection, but more people don't even have the chance to get an injection, because the doctors and nurses are simply too busy. Even some doctors and nurses who are not respiratory I was recruited temporarily, but I still couldn't resist the tide of patients. As soon as this video was released, similar videos appeared in many places. This is not a city, but all over the country. There are even some foreign students sending videos back to China to ask for help. They are sick, but they can't get medical treatment. Now the flights are grounded now, they can't even buy high-priced air tickets to return home. What's more frightening is that the foreign countries are completely messed up. They can't even go out to buy food, so they can only hide at home. They hope that the country will hear their voices and take them home. They don't know if this global smog is a harbinger of the end, but the country they are in now has obviously become the end of the world. They never knew that in their lifetime, they could experience something like a time of war in a civilized country, general burning and looting. The first country to launch an evacuation operation was Huaxia. After overseas students and many stranded tourists sent out distress videos, the news released the evacuation operation the next day. Some people lamented the country's power of action, but some began to curse with their keyboards, saying that saving these people is a waste of the country's resources, and those who want to go abroad when there is nothing wrong, and want to return to the country when something happens, are not worth it at all. Save. The internet is very lively, and all the topics are smog, evacuation operations, and strange lung swelling. Some people have already associated this large-scale epidemic disease with the strange thick fog and smog before, but some people said that this disease had already appeared before the thick fog, so what the pathogen is has yet to be verified. When the epidemic broke out, many people were afraid to go out. They didn't know how the disease got it, whether it was the air or the torrential rain before. Those who got sick were desperate, and those who were not sick were panicking. Before the complete chaos, the country began to operate quickly, starting from the worst cities, stopping the opening of all public places, stopping the operation of all workplaces. Everyone must stay at home, from the community, to the urban area, layer upon layer of control. This is not a shutdown of a city, it is almost a shutdown of the whole country. This is undoubtedly a heavy blow to the country's economy. Maybe this shutdown will make the economy that the country has finally developed can be set back for decades, but the country still does this, even though it is risky, but it can protect the lives of more people. Their country is considered to be the fastest to move, the thunder strikes, and there is no one to object, so they can only obey the arrangement. But in foreign countries, this kind of national shutdown is almost impossible, such as marching with placards, gathering crowds to make trouble, clamoring for the government. Some people jointly robbed the supermarket, some people blew up the police station in anger, etc. What a mess have to. On the second day after the start of the evacuation, some people who have successfully returned to the country have sent out videos of the evacuation. Except for the stranded tourists and students in their country, other countries have it. When people of different skin colors and different races gather together, amid all kinds of flustered and desperate emotions, the bright red flags became the most beautiful scenery in the eyes of everyone. Looking at the many people who were still stranded in the same place, those who boarded the plane to return to the country were full of gratitude for their survival after the catastrophe. When the news announced that the epidemic was most likely related to smog, many people in Mu Nan's community were already sick. Because of the community's control, many sick people had no way to go to the hospital by themselves, so they had to contact the community. The community goes to the hospital to arrange the number, but it is not that one hospital corresponds to one community, but dozens, or even hundreds of communities. There are too many sick people, so how can this be arranged? People who have been unable to wait for treatment will inevitably do some extreme things under all kinds of desperation, smashing and making troubles, and some even smashed the doors and windows of other people's houses. Holding me is hard, and no one else can think about it. Extreme mentality. Well, these people were naturally arrested in the end, but the paralysis of medical treatment prevented many people from getting a chance to go to the hospital, and they couldn't wake up again. In his previous life, Mu Nan didn't feel so deeply. At that time, he didn't feel that this was the end of the world, because the country's control was still in place, and the overall planning and scheduling maintained social order, which made many people believe that when the initial chaos passed, it will get better later on, so even if he was locked at home, he didn't panic at all. His work was not affected by the smog and he couldn't go out. Time hangs on the internet to eat melons. Now he is idling at home, seeing more things from the internet, and this time the feeling is naturally deeper. But compared to those subsequent disasters, the smog this time is still the lightest. At least the country and human nature have not completely lost control at this time. When the iron gate outside was knocked, Mu Nan didn't think much about it. He thought it was a community visit to investigate. Their community established a group after the smog closed the area. Any notices will be posted in the group. 2 days ago, that is to say, in the past few days, someone will come to register the number of people at home. When he opened the door and saw a familiar yet unfamiliar person, Mu Nan was stunned. He had known Qin Huai since he was born. It was said that Qin Huai held the bottle to feed him the first milk he drank. He was so small that he was still hugging him, so he stretched out his hand to feed him. He had been separated from Qin Huai since he was 15 years old. Counting his last life, he couldn't remember how many years he had been separated from Qin Huai. When Qin Huai appeared in front of him again, his mind went blank. He thought he would never find her again. The person in his life came back, and he thought he might never see the person again in this life, and he saw it again. But the moment he saw the other party, Mu Nan's heart throbbed. The grown-up Qin Huai was no longer what he remembered. This strange appearance told him that no matter how close they were, the missing those years are lost after all. Looking at the dazed man standing at the door, Qin Huai pursed his lips slightly, his heart aching uncontrollably. His Nan, the person he misses day and night, has become estranged from him because of these years of separation. Looking greedily at Mu Nan, Qin Huai's voice trembled slightly. Now, I'm not even allowed to enter the house. After regaining consciousness, Mu Nan took a step back, hid her trembling hands behind her back, and made way for Qin Huai. Qin Huai closed the iron gate, and couldn't help but want to reach out and rub his head to comfort him like he did when he was a child. When he just raised his hand and saw the clothes on his body, Qin Huai stepped back and put them down. He just came back from the outside. Knowing whether he has the virus, seeing Mu Nan bowed his head in silence, Qin Huai said in a slightly shivering voice, I'm coming back this time, and I will never leave again. Mu Nan didn't say a word. He didn't know how to face Qin Huai now. When he couldn't find Qin Huai, he tried desperately to find him. Now that Qin Huai came back, the strangeness brought by the time and the two lives was not the same. It can be erased so easily, so apart from being silent, he doesn't know what to say. Seeing that Mu Nan didn't speak, Qin Huai was a little sad and at a loss. When he left, Nan hated him so decisively. He left Nan alone, and it was right for Nan to resent him in his heart. They were all silent for a while, before Qin Huai pretended to smile casually. I'll take a shower first, I'm a little dirty when I come back from outside. He looked at Mu Nan with some tentative temptations. I'll come to see you after I take a shower. Only then did Mu Nan say, your bathroom hasn't been used in years. Then she turned and went back to her home, but the door was not closed. Qin Huai smiled, and followed Mu Nan into the door. As soon as he entered the door, the furnishings in the house were different from what he remembered. There was even a bed in the living room. The balcony where they used to sit with their legs dangling across the railing to watch the scenery was also closed. Time has changed a lot after all. Qin Huai put down his bag and took off his shoes at the door. Mu Nan opened the shoe cabinet and brought him a pair of slippers that fit Qin Huai's size. Qin Huai changed his shoes, picked up his bag and walked to the bathroom, asking, "Do you have any bigger clothes at home?" "The clothes I brought got dirty along the way." Mu Nan didn't say anything, but walked towards the balcony where the wardrobe was installed. Qin Huai walked into the bathroom familiarly, first threw the dirty clothes in the bag into the washing machine, then took off his own clothes and threw them in, and then went into the shower to take a shower. Mu Nan prepared a lot of clothes, because he hadn't seen Qin Huai for many years, and he didn't know whether he was fat or thin when he bought the clothes, but he felt that Qin Huai should be strong. When he was in junior high school, Qin Huai's physique was tall and strong in the class, so when he bought clothes before, he bought a lot of large sizes. Now he looks thinner than expected, but the clothes should be suitable. After putting the new clothes for Qin Huai in the outer room of the bathroom, Mu Nan went to the kitchen to cook a bowl of noodles. Now that all means of transportation are closed, private cars cannot go on the road without a pass, and I don't know how Qin Huai came back. If it wasn't for the sound of water coming from the bathroom, Mu Nan wouldn't have believed that Qin Huai really came back. Listening to the constant sound of water coming from the bathroom, Mu Nan couldn't help but feel a little dazed, inexplicably unreal. After Qin Huai took a shower, as soon as he came out, he saw a bowl of noodles on the small table next to the bed, while Mu Nan was sitting on the other side of the bed looking down at his phone. Qin Huai sat over and looked at the noodles in the bowl, his eyes were a little sour. Although Mu Nan's parents passed away early, she has been living with him, not to mention the following, and she doesn't even know how to cook. Now, Mu Nan grew up alone in a life he never participated in. Natural Disaster Apocalypse Chapter 6. It has been more than a week since the smog. When Qin Huai left, the means of transportation had basically stopped. At the beginning, self-driving was fine, but later some expressways were closed. Qin Huai had no choice but to keep detours. He walked for more than a week with an hour-long plane distance. He was not very hungry all the way, but he was full of bread and biscuits. He hadn't eaten warm food for so long. He quickly drank a bowl of noodles and even the soup. Mu Nan, who was looking down at the phone, said when Qin Huai put down the bowl, "There's still more in the kitchen." Qin Huai said, "Enough, it's too late, there's no need to eat too much." Seeing that Qin Huai stopped eating, Mu Nan didn't say anything more. Although he had been looking for Qin Huai since his rebirth, but now that Qin Huai was in front of him, he didn't know how to face it. At this time in the previous life, his first reaction when he saw Qin Huai might be to cry, or maybe to scold, but it was more of joy and intimacy, rather than a bewildered silence like now. After all, it's different. After a lifetime and a death, some things have been suppressed too deeply, and it's not so easy to let them out. Qin Huai saw that Mu Nan kept his back to him, so he simply sat on the bed, stretched out his hand and turned Mu Nan around. Nan, let's talk." Mu Nan couldn't help picking at the phone case with her fingers, and bowed her head in silence. Qin Huai said, "Are you short of money?" Mu Nan subconsciously looked up at Qin Huai, then quickly turned her head away without saying a word. Qin Huai stretched out his hand and rubbed his head, because the cut was too short. It was not as fluffy as before, and it was a bit sticky, but this kind of substantive touch after many years still made Qin Huai feel a little bit happier, because Mu Nan didn't resist his movements. Probably seeing that Mu Nan didn't resist so much, Qin Huai's tense heart relaxed a little, and then he said, "Wang Xiaoli said you were looking for me. You were looking for me everywhere, what happened?" Wang Xiaoli is the class monitor of Qinhuai High School, but the relationship is quite ordinary. After all, he went abroad before finishing high school, and the connection between them is only in the same high school group. Not long ago, Wang Xiaoli suddenly sent him a message, saying that Mu Nan was everywhere. When he was looking for him, he came back in a hurry, but he was stranded at the airport due to the thick fog. He waited anxiously all night. After the thick fog cleared, there was a smog that could not go away. He couldn't wait any longer and drove directly. Return. At the end of the car, there was no place to refuel. He finally came back on his bicycle with his bag on his back. Nan looked up at him, although his expression was calm, but his eyes were a little red. If I don't look for you, will you never come back in this life? Huai's eyes gradually darkened. I said that I will definitely come back. Nan really wanted to say, you also said that you would not leave, but he has grown up, and he doesn't take things for granted like when he was a child, so he swallowed this subconscious rebuttal, and asked calmly, if I don't look for you, when do you plan to come back? A bit of struggle flashed in Huai's eyes, when I think you still need me. Nan took a deep breath, and said in a cold voice, then you are not afraid that if you leave, one day I will die somewhere you don't know, and even if you regret it, you will never have the chance to see me again. Huai's complexion sank. You're talking nonsense, don't curse yourself. Nan pushed Huai away, turned his back to him and lay down, and began to feel wronged in his heart. What did he mean when he felt that he was still needed? He obviously, since he was a child, never needed him. Huai sat on the bed and watched him for a while, and he also knew that the knot would not be untied in a short while, so he pulled the blanket beside him and covered him. It's too late, go to sleep. I'll go there first. Yes, come back this time, I won't leave again. What's the matter? Let's talk tomorrow, Nan, no matter what happens, this time, unless you don't want me, you drive me away, otherwise I will never leave again. Gone. Nan ignored him, but listened to him getting up from the bed, put on his slippers, and thoughtfully went out to turn off the light for him. However, when Huai returned to his home, he was completely dumbfounded. One room was piled up with furniture, another room was piled up with earthen pots, and even the living room had only one path to walk on. It hasn't grown yet, but some are sprouting green shoots, and there's the sound of chickens crowing from the balcony. Huai couldn't laugh or cry at that moment, turned his house into a plantation farm, which probably only Nan could do. Reluctantly closing the door, Huai returned to Nan's house lightly. At his house, even the kitchen was full of things. Apart from coming to sleep, he didn't even have a place to nest for the night. Although the layout of the house was different from what he remembered, the person sleeping next to him was still the one he was familiar with. Huai, who had been exhausted all the way, fell asleep very quickly. The curtains were drawn down, so the room with the lights turned off was completely dark, but after the eyes got used to the darkness, they could vaguely see the silhouettes of the people around them. Huai slept soundly, probably because he was very tired from the journey. People who never snored when they were young are now snoring. Nan leaned closer to Huai, and the hand under the quilt quietly pinched the corner of Huai's clothes. He didn't know when Nan fell asleep. He was thinking about things in his heart, thinking about how to tell Huai about the future. Rebirth must not be said, but space can be said. Huai's strangeness was only due to the vacancy in these years, but the strangeness brought about by this time did not affect his trust in Huai at all. Trusting Huai was like trusting himself. Thinking about it, Nan fell asleep unknowingly. After falling asleep, he fell into that terrible dream again. In the dream, he returned to the previous life, and was blocked in the house by a group of murderers. Although he also has a knife in his space, but there are a group of people on the opposite side, and even two of them are holding arrows and crossbows. How can he be defeated by a kitchen knife alone? After taking it away, those people found a few bottles of water and half a tortilla in his room. I don't know if it was too little or they didn't intend to let him go. During the fight, he didn't even feel the knife pierced in. It wasn't until they kicked him away suddenly, and then ran away in a swarm, that he felt the pain, and the blood that couldn't be stopped no matter how much he covered it. Nan suddenly woke up from the dream. The suffocation and fear before death seemed to have not dissipated from him, especially where he was stabbed, there was still a hideous pain. As soon as Nan moved, Huai woke up with a start. He stretched out his hand, and the people around him were drenched in sweat. He hurriedly got up and turned on the light. Seeing Nan's face covered in cold sweat and his pale face, he covered his stomach with one hand, and immediately said nervously, "What's the matter, Nan? Have a nightmare, or something uncomfortable? Stomach pain?" It took Nan a while to recover from the suffocation of the nightmare. His body was sticky with sweat. He shook his head towards Huai, and said in a weak voice, "It's okay, I had a nightmare, I'm going to take a shower." Qin Huai watched him walk into the bathroom weakly, fearing that something would happen to him. He stood at the door and shouted after a while, only to be relieved when he got a response. Mu Nan took a shower, his head throbbed in pain after waking up from the dream. He looked at Qin Huai, who couldn't hide his tiredness, and said, "Go to sleep, I'm fine." Seeing him lying down on his back, Qin Huai leaned over and touched his cold palm. "What happened?" "I was so frightened by the nightmare." As he spoke, he reached out and touched his stomach. After waking up from the nightmare, it seemed that he held his stomach uncomfortable for a while. Mu Nan, who was lying on the bed, was silent for a while before speaking. "Do you believe in the end of the world?" If Mu Nan asked this question before, Qin Huai must have asked him on a whim when he saw something again, but seeing that he was frightened like that by the nightmare just now, he thought that Mu Nan was looking for him everywhere, and even used up all of him to enter the account. The money in the bag suddenly jumped up. Nan, why do you ask such a question? What happened?" When Mu Nan was silent just now, he had already thought of an explanation. He never thought of hiding the space, and it was naturally impossible to hide the goods from Qin Huai. Then there must be a reason for everything. From more than 3 months ago, I started to have nightmares. I dreamed about the heavy rain not long ago, I dreamed about the thick fog, and the smog. There are still many disasters behind. I don't know if it will happen, but some have already. It came true, the dream came true, I couldn't take it as a dream at all. The person he trusts the most in this world is Qin Huai. Qin Huai has been by his side since he was born and was still in the hospital's incubator. Before going to kindergarten, he almost grew up on Qin Huai's body. That is, he went to sleep at Qin Huai's house, but he had to sleep with Qin Huai, otherwise he would cry endlessly. Although the two grew up later, the situation of being stuck together and unwilling to separate was much better, but they were still together almost every day. From when Qin Huai was doing homework, he played on the sidelines, to when Qin Huai was doing his homework, Qin Huai helped him with tutoring. Before the day when he separated at the age of 15, Qin Huai had never been absent from his life. So this trust is deeper than blood relationship. If he couldn't believe even Qin Huai, then tomorrow would be completely meaningless to him. But rebirth has nothing to do with trust. The meaning behind rebirth is too heavy. He doesn't want Qin Huai to bear something that he shouldn't have to bear in this life. Qin Huai said in a deep voice, "So the epidemic caused by the smog will kill many people, and after the smog, there will be severe cold and heat, earthquakes and droughts, and various disasters." Mu Nan hummed, and Qin Huai put his hand on his head. "I believe you, as long as it is what you say, I will believe it." What's more, Mu Nan's state can't fool him. Even if he has been separated for many years, he will not be able to trust Mu Nan. Nan's understanding has never been lacking. Even though this matter sounds a bit unbelievable, he still chooses to believe it without hesitation. Qin Huai stretched out his hand and pulled him into his arms, and then pressed him to lie down. "Sleep with me for a while, the sky will fall after waking up, don't be afraid, no matter what disasters happen in the future, I will accompany you with you, I will never leave again." Mu Nan turned his body sideways, turned his back to Qin Huai, and muttered in a low voice, "Liar." Qin Huai smiled, "I won't lie to you again, I swear." Natural Disaster Apocalypse Chapter 7. Mu Nan was woken up by the knock on the door. When he turned around and saw that Qin Huai was in a deep sleep, he got up lightly. But when he moved, Qin Huai immediately opened his eyes. It took him a while to realize where he was. There was a knock on the door, and he grabbed Mu Nan, who was about to get out of bed. "Lie down, I'll go and have a look." The person who knocked on the door was from the community to register. After knocking for a long time, no one answered. "I thought there was no one at home." Just as I was about to leave, the anti-theft door was opened. Someone passed a notebook to Qin Huai. "Write down your name, contact information, and house number on it. Is there anyone living next door to you?" Qin Huai nodded, first wrote down his own information, and then filled in Mu Nan's information as well. The community investigator took a look. "Is there only one family?" Qin Huai hummed, and the investigator took out another piece of paper with a QR code. "This is a group in the community, which is divided into buildings. This is your building. You add one, and if there is any news in the future, we will notify you in the group. Try not to go out during this time, and contact us if you have any difficulties in life." Qin Huai added a WeChat message, thanked him, and then closed the door. After returning to the house, seeing Mu Nan looking at him, he said, I came to count the number of people, and I filled in all the information. Mu Nan suddenly said, do you know my phone number? Because the door was open, he heard the registrar asking for the phone number, and wanted to say that Qin Huai would come in and ask himself, but he actually filled it out directly. Qin Huai nodded. Although he did not appear in Mu Nan's life these years, Mu Nan never disappeared from his life. He remembered the other party's phone number more clearly than his own. Mu Nan lowered her head, know my phone number but never contact me. Do you know that in the past few months, I have used all means to find you, and even you are ready to come back, and you have never called me. If he knew his phone number in this life, he must have known it in his last life, but until his death, he never got a call from Qin Huai. Qin Huai felt a pain in his heart. I thought you still hated me for leaving with him, thought you didn't want to see me, I thought you were living a good life. Jiang Xian has always had my contact information, didn't he keep in touch with you all the time? I thought that if you were looking for me for something, as long as you found him, you would be able to contact me. Knowing that you were looking for me, I rushed back almost immediately, but I didn't expect continuous heavy rain first, followed by thick fog. I still don't drive the train, and I almost couldn't help calling you several times on the way back, but I'm afraid that you will know that I am on the way back, and you will come out to find me in a hurry. The Mu Nan in Qin Huai's memory is still the former Mu Nan, with a self-willed and stubborn temper. If he called before he came back, Mu Nan might not be able to wait for him, so he might really rush to find him. When I came back by bike, there was no guarantee that there would be a charging place on the way. If Mu Nan couldn't contact him, wouldn't he be even more anxious and afraid, and after thinking a lot, he held back and didn't call. At the beginning, he went abroad with that person, and later left Mu Nan with his contact information, but at that time, Mu Nan broke up with him very angry. When he couldn't even control his own future life, besides asking someone to take care of him, say goodbye, most are pale. It was also because Mu Nan had never contacted him in these years, so even if he came back later, he would just secretly see if he was doing well. He was not ready yet, and he was afraid that Mu Nan would tell him that after all these years, when I grow up, I don't need my little brother anymore. Although Mu Nan never used the living expenses he sent to Mu Nan, the process of saving money for Mu Nan's living expenses every month made him feel that there was still a thread between him and Mu Nan. Just like Mu Nan was afraid of facing Qin Huai, who had become a stranger, Qin Huai was also afraid of facing Mu Nan, who no longer needed him. Before they had the courage to face up to the changes brought about by these times, they always thought that there was still time to take their time. Hearing Qin Huai's words, Mu Nan was even more puzzled. Jiang Xian. I haven't seen him since you left. When I first started having those nightmares, I went to Jiang Xian and wanted to ask Jiang Xian what he knew. I don't know where you are, I wanted to find you, but he said he didn't contact you. Jiang Xian is Qin Huai's classmate, and he has a good relationship. He used to go to Qin Huai's house to do homework together, so Mu Nan also knew each other. It can't be said that he was not familiar with him, but he was not very close. The relationship between him and Jiang Xian was only because of Qin Huai. When Qin Huai left, how could a former classmate of his brother still have contact with him? If it wasn't because Jiang Xian didn't move, he probably wouldn't even know where Jiang Xian was. Qin Huai's eyes instantly turned cold. Mu Nan looked at him, so Jiang Xian never told you that I was looking for you? Qin Huai shook his head. If he did, how could he hear about it from an unfamiliar former squad leader, and how could he just come back now? Mu Nan was silent for a while. When did you return to China? Qin Huai said, 6 months ago, in City B, I co-founded a company with someone abroad, and the branch was located in City B. At the beginning, I wanted to make arrangements there first. I'll see you again after you graduate from university. See if you are willing to come with me. Mu Nan, if I don't want to. Qin Huai smiled, if you really don't want to and don't need me anymore, I will let you go and let you live the life you want. If you just ignore me because you are angry and lose your temper, I'll coax you well until you don't get angry and come with me. After Qin Huai finished speaking, he gently rubbed Mu Nan's hair. Sometimes because of the time and distance, he would always think about some things in the direction he least wanted to face. It was not as bad as expected, and there were even unexpected surprises. They still have a lot to say, but they are not in a hurry now. Seeing that it is getting late, Qin Huai said, "Are you hungry? Have breakfast first, and I will tell you everything you want to know after breakfast." There are a lot of ready-made things in the kitchen, and the refrigerator is also filled with all kinds of vegetables and fruits. These were all put in by Mu Nan yesterday when Qin Huai was taking a bath. At that time, he hadn't figured out how to tell Qin Huai about the future. And there is space. He thought that it would take some time for him and Qin Huai to get along with each other, but he didn't expect that in just one night, many things had been discussed, and also the strangeness he felt when he suddenly saw Qin Huai yesterday, it also seems to dissipate. Hearing the sound of fried eggs coming from the kitchen, Mu Nan felt that even though the sky was still shrouded in smog outside, his mood was much clearer. After breakfast, Qin Huai handled some matters with his mobile phone and made a few phone calls. It seemed that he was making some work arrangements. After finishing the processing, he turned off his mobile phone and moved away the small computer in front of him. Table looked at him face to face and said, "About those dreams you had, please tell me what's going on." Mu Nan opened a small book next to the bed, and handed it to Qin Huai. "This is all recorded after I had a dream, and some things recorded on it will happen." It recorded some approximate time and the environment at that time. Qin Huai looked at it very seriously, and the more he looked at it, the deeper his frown became. What he saw when he turned the page was no longer about the future foreseen in his dream, but some food items. Thinking of the money that Mu Nan suddenly spent, Qin Huai said, "Did you use all that money to prepare supplies?" Mu Nan nodded. Qin Huai turned back again. "Is it recorded on this that you are planning to buy, or have you already bought? Where are you going to put these things? Food is not easy to store, especially vegetables and fruits. If the environment in the future is like yours, the dream is so bad, these things can't be stored at all." Mu Nan said, "This is the second thing I want to tell you." Qin Huai looked at him. Mu Nan stretched out his hand towards Qin Huai. Under Qin Huai's puzzled gaze, an apple suddenly appeared in Mu Nan's hand. Mu Nan explained slowly, "In the year you left, I transferred to a boarding school. One day I had a fever in the dormitory. The teacher fed me medicine and left me in the dormitory to sleep. I felt so hot when I was burning, I felt that my whole body was going to be burned dry, and when the burning was blurry, I seemed to be able to touch another dimension, like another dimension. After I woke up after the fever subsided, that feeling is still there, and then I have an extra space, but this space is empty, there is nothing, people can't get in, and living things can't fit in, but fortunately, everything will not change when it is put in, as if frozen in an instant." It took Qin Huai a while to accept all this from Mu Nan's words. Perhaps Mu Nan's dream about what happened in the future may also be related to space. But compared to space, Qin Huai cared more about Mu Nan being alone these years. When he was a child, whenever Mu Nan felt a little uncomfortable, he would make all kinds of troubles, and it took a long time to be coaxed to take medicine. Even though he had already anticipated these possible situations when he left, when he heard Mu Nan say that he was sleeping alone in the dormitory with a cold and fever, his heart was still throbbing with depression. Qin Huai breathed out slightly. The past is irreversible, and he will not let Nan bear it alone again, and repeatedly asked if the existence of space had any other bad influence on himself. According to what Mu Nan said, except for an extra place to put things, there is no other abnormality, so he said, "Who else knows about this except me?" Mu Nan said, "I'm not stupid." Qin Huai smiled, looked at Mu Nan, who was visibly more lively than the silent one yesterday, felt relieved, and continued, "You wrote everything down in the notebook. Are there any more details?" Mu Nan said, "I wrote down everything I remember, and I bought everything on it." Then he turned out another notebook. "This one records the quantity I bought, but unfortunately I don't have any money, and I'm running out of time." Qin Huai flipped through it and saw that there were several pages of paper, some big and some small items, and even bought a box of things like sewing boxes, which was really thoughtful. Qin Huai read it from the beginning. "In your dream, after the smog, it was extremely hot. Did it become chaotic as soon as it got hot, or was there a normal period in between?" Mu Nan said, "It gradually became chaotic, but it wasn't the kind of out-of-control chaos. The country's control has always been there, but later the weather became more and more extreme, and many things could not be produced, so it became more and more difficult. Qin Huai suddenly looked at Mu Nan. Is your dream coherent? Mu Nan lowered his head and scratched at his hands, avoiding Qin Huai's eyes. No, it's quite fragmented, but it can be spliced together. Qin Huai didn't think too much, just said, then there is still some time, I will deal with my affairs, and I can get back some money. Mu Nan suddenly raised her head. You want to go back? Seeing Mu Nan's reaction was so strong, Qin Huai quickly said, if you don't go back, I won't leave after I said I won't leave, just do some operations online, Nan, I won't leave again, I promise. Mu Nan also felt that he had overreacted, but he would rather Qin Huai give up those assets. Anyway, the money is not as good as paper in the end, and he doesn't want Qin Huai to take the risk of leaving. His space is not enough for the two of them for a lifetime, at least these few days Nian can't starve to death, so there is no need to take risks for those external things. When Qin Huai was sorting out his assets, he received a message from Jiang Xian. He and Jiang Xian were classmates from junior high school to high school, and they had never lost contact after going abroad, because they had to rely on Jiang Xian to learn about Mu Nan's situation in China. The relationship has been very close over the years, and even after he returned to China, Jiang Xian quit his original job and came to work in his company. Because Jiang Xian's home is here, he comes back frequently. He often asks Jiang Xian to help him see Mu Nan, and he does know a lot about Mu Nan from Jiang Xian. For example, he made new friends. The relationship is good, he is very popular in school, he often participates in some painting competitions, and even won prizes. He lives well and is very happy every day. Even Mu Nan's annual physical examination report, Jiang Xian would copy a copy for him to read. He thought that Nan and Jiang Xian had a good relationship these years. Because of this relationship, he never thought that if something happened to Nan unexpectedly, Nan had never met Jiang Xian, and Nan even took the initiative to find Jiang Xian, but Jiang Xian said that he could not be contacted. If Jiang Xian had told Nan where he was when Nan was looking for Jiang Xian 3 months ago, then Nan would not have to bear these burdens alone in the past few months. He remembered that Jiang Xian once told him that when he met Mu Nan, when he was mentioned, Mu Nan said that he didn't want to mention him, and said that it was all over. Because of Mu Nan's attitude that he learned from Jiang Xian, Qin Huai has been holding back his urgency to see Mu Nan in the past 6 months since returning to China, so Jiang Xian has been lying to him all along. Looking at the word Jiang Xian on WeChat, Qin Huai's eyes turned cold. Natural Disaster Apocalypse Chapter 8. Qin Huai came back, so things like planting vegetables and watering and cleaning up the poo of the chickens naturally all fell on his head. Mu Nan has become psychologically dependent. At home, it is still a lot of fun. Although the gap between the two has not completely dissipated, Qin Huai can clearly feel that Nan is actively approaching him, but this approach is a plan for the future. Qin Huai knew that Nan had his presence in each of Nan's plans, but apart from that, Nan didn't mention anything about his life alone in these years. Thinking of Nan when he was a child, he would share every detail with him. If he was wronged outside, he would even complain to him, and he had to coax him for a long time before he became happy again. But now, for these things years of suffering, but he didn't say anything. Qin Huai knew that it would not take a short while to completely break the ice. Even though he was a little anxious, he also knew that there was no rush. Qin Huai has been back for almost 2 days, and the epidemic outside has also reached its peak. Looking at various news on the internet every day, Mu Nan is a little scared. Fortunately, you came back early and your health is considered good, otherwise you will be trapped on the road. There is no way to ask for help. Qin Huai's ability to rush back all depended on his perseverance. Although he was exercising every day, this exercise was just a general physical exercise. If it wasn't for his perseverance, he wouldn't have the stamina to ride a bicycle for a few days, so he recuperated overnight after returning home. After that, for the next 2 days, my hands and feet were so weak that I even wished I could support the wall when I went to the bathroom. Fortunately, Mu Nan prepared a lot of things, and bought a bunch of soothing plasters, and put them on Qin Huai's arms and legs every day, and massaged him with a massager. Looking at Qin Huai who was covered in plasters all over his body, Mu Nan sighed and said, it seems that I have to catch the physical part again, otherwise I won't be able to run away if I run into something later. Qin Huai also felt that he couldn't relax in terms of physical fitness. Seeing the future scenes Mu Nan dreamed about, even if he had space and food, he might not need to worry too much, but poor physical fitness would also be a hindrance, so he said, "From tomorrow onwards, I will teach you Sanda. When you were young, you gave up after 2 days of learning, and life will be so difficult in the future, learning a little kung fu will not hurt." Qin Huai practiced it when he was a child, and Mu Nan wanted to learn it because of Qin Huai. Unfortunately, he didn't have the perseverance, so he gave up before he even finished the basic skills, and went to the painting interest class instead. Qin Huai has learned it for quite a long time. Even when he went abroad, he would practice it occasionally, but he never lost some skills. Qin Huai didn't want to teach him at first. Mu Nan is a person who has no perseverance and can't bear hardships, but now seeing him insist on running for an hour every day, he changed his mind, especially if the future becomes more and more chaotic. Relying on space alone is the guarantee if he can't be safe. Teach Mu Nan some ways to save his life, so that if something happens in the future, he can rest assured. The life of the two of them staying at home gradually became more regular, running in the morning and learning Sanda at night, Qin Huai cooking at noon, and Mu Nan following some online tutorials to dump food in the afternoon, and stacking raw ingredients into finished products in a space, so that getting along day and night every day, the two slowly regained a little of their childhood feelings. Although Mu Nan rarely mentioned his own life, Qin Huai would take the initiative to tell him about his life abroad these years. At the beginning, his father insisted on taking him away because he was diagnosed with asthenospermia. Although asthenospermia is not as hopeless as dead sperm, the possibility of childbearing is very low. With the existence of a son, that man will naturally take him away whatever he says. The difference is nothing more than being taken away forcefully and being taken away voluntarily. What Qin Huai didn't tell Mu Nan is that the biggest reason why he was willing to go with that man back then it was the man who threatened him with Mu Nan. The world of adults is so dirty, and they will do anything to achieve their goals. In the first few years, his life was not bad, and he was the only man who had one child, so he naturally devoted himself to cultivating it. Now that he has been separated from Mu Nan, there is no benefit in resisting stubbornly. It is better to work hard to become strong, so strong that no one can control his life in the future. I just didn't expect that the man had another child later on. Although it was a test tube baby, it was still a success. One son brought back halfway, who still hated him in his heart, and a blank sheet of paper. It was obvious which one to choose, so Qin Huai, who hadn't even finished university, was given up. Mu Nan didn't expect Qin Huai to live such a life outside, and said angrily and distressed, "And then? He doesn't want you anymore, why don't you come back?" Qin Huai looked at him and smiled, because at that time he had no money to come back, and the air ticket to return to China was 20,000 yuan, and Nan had just entered university at that time, and was still in the art department, so it was very expensive, and there was not much he could give Nan, since if you can't give him company, then try to give him enough food and clothing. But Qin Huai naturally won't say anything about it. He just said, "If I came back at that time, wouldn't it be a shame? You were crying and wanting to break up with me back then. Also said that man is not a good thing, don't regret it if I leave." Mu Nan glared at him, "You know I don't mean that." Qin Huai hugged him and rubbed his head, "I know, it's just that I haven't finished my studies yet, and I just started a studio with a friend, and I also want to make some achievements, so why should he take me away? I can only go with him. If he doesn't want me, I can only come back." Mu Nan fell silent, thinking in his heart that it was a good thing he didn't tell Qin Huai about his rebirth. If Qin Huai knew that he didn't come back to look for him in his last life until he died, I don't know how guilty and sad he would be. Although Mu Nan still has doubts in his heart, since Qin Huai has been back for half a year, why didn't he come to look for him in the previous life? The end didn't come suddenly, and it didn't mean that the communication was cut off suddenly, and there was obviously a period of order before the chaos. It's a pity that this doubt can't be solved in this life. While the two were talking, Qin Huai heard crying and howling from downstairs, so he stood on the balcony with a telescope and looked down. The thick fog in the city had already begun to dissipate. Even though they were on the 17th floor, some silhouettes could be seen through the streetlights downstairs. It was half a month since he came back, and this was already the 7th car of the funeral home. After a period of medical observation, the disease is not highly contagious, and the infectious activity is basically lost after death. Therefore, there is no need for special medical staff to protect and transport the dead, so the general funeral the car is enough, but the dead are dragged away, and the remaining people have to grieve for their lost relatives and worry about whether they will be infected. This kind of wailing and crying is performed almost every day in desperation. In the past half a month, Qin Huai was thankful more than once. Fortunately, the monitor of the high school contacted him and told Nan Nan that he was looking for him. Fortunately, he was too worried when he saw that the account he sent money to Mu Nan was empty. Come back and take a look, otherwise, if Mu Nan is left alone in this situation, and there is no way to contact him, I don't know how scared he will be. A major event happened in the community where Mu Nan lived. There was a sick man who ran around for several days but couldn't even get in the hospital gate. He felt desperate and ran out of the house without thinking about anything, and then took a pile of stones and smashed the windows of more than a dozen low-rise buildings, 2 of which had a newborn baby at home. Later, that person was smashed by the desperate resident who threw the flower pot, which stopped the other party's crazy behavior. When the incident happened, the community was in chaos. Although the staff in the community had protective clothing, the other party was like crazy. Even though they were wearing protective clothing, they dared not go out, for fear that the other party would scratch their clothes and expose them to the fog. In the haze. At that time, Mu Nan was making steamed buns at home, and he was startled when a commotion broke out downstairs. Since every household hadn't gone out, the whole community was extremely quiet, and the sudden riot made the whole community commotion. Holding the binoculars, Mu Nan could just see the man smashing the windows in the building opposite him. Their side is an old community. How did many people move in at the beginning? It's still the same now. Some of the doors and windows haven't even been replaced. In a house decades ago, the original windows were all single-layered, and they were so fragile that they would break if they were smashed. In many homes, the windows were broken so that their eyes were red, and they wanted to jump out and chop with a knife, but there was no protection. He didn't even wear a mask, so he could only be dragged into another closed room by his family members in a panic. In the end, the man was hit by the flower pot and fell to the ground. After making sure that the man was motionless and not aggressive, the community personnel came out and dragged him away. It was only after the incident that Mu Nan remembered it. In his previous life, he also stayed at home. Although the outside became scary, with death and infectious diseases everywhere, but because the government was still maintaining the schedule, he had enough food, there is no need to go out at all, so the sense of crisis is not deep. He still remembers that this crazy man should die in the end, but there is a family with a very small child, because the window was smashed, and a little outside air was sucked in. It may be because he was too young and did not have much immunity. He had a high fever that night, and the child died in the end. The father of the child hacked into the community committee with a knife, because at that time, all the people in the community were hiding in the hospital in fear of death. In the room, even though they were still wearing protective clothing, they didn't dare to come out to stop the madman. If they had come out to stop him, his child might not have died. So, in a panic, the man directly vented his anger on the staff of the neighborhood committee. Thinking of what happened in the previous life, Mu Nan couldn't help but said, "Fortunately, our house lives on a high floor." Qin Huai glanced at the window that Mu Nan had replaced in advance. "Even if it's not high, you can't break this window with a stone. Even if it's broken, we can still live on the other side." The outside gradually quieted down, but the group was blown up. Mu Nan didn't watch the group, and even if he did, it was useless. The smashed window couldn't be restored, and the child who might have been infected by now couldn't be rescued either. He continued to bow his head and make steamed buns, and he would not think wildly while doing things. In the beginning, the steamed buns he made were either unnetted and turned into lumps, or they were not round enough to be too ugly, but now he has gradually gained experience. Put it away, and when you want to eat it, you can take it out at any time, and it will still look just out of the pan. Qin Huai said from the side, "I've been making steamed buns for a few days, let's make steamed stuffed buns tomorrow. Even if you need to escape in the future, it's better to eat something with oil and water." After thinking for a while, he said, "Make the buns into the shape of steamed buns." Mu Nan raised his head and glanced at Qin Huai. in the future, when there is a shortage of food and you have to eat tree bark and grass, you will be very eye-catching whether it is steamed buns or buns. Although he said so, Mu Nan still listened to Qin Huai's words and gave the buns change the shape. Just take out an extra rib, tomorrow you can make sweet and sour pork ribs. Qin Huai smiled and said hello. In the middle of the night, a miserable cry suddenly resounded through the entire community. Even Mu Nan's 17th floor, which had been replaced with thicker double-layer soundproof glass, could not resist the sound, and it directly scared him who was already asleep. A thrill. Mu Nan subconsciously touched the phone, but was suppressed by Qin Huai, who also woke up, and covered his ears with one hand. Sleep, don't look at it. Mu Nan didn't struggle either, and knew what was going on with the crying. Everything was the same as in the previous life, and the child was still gone. The next day Mu Nan woke up, and when he opened his eyes, he saw Qin Huai who was leaning against the bed and looking at his phone. Qin Huai rubbed his messy hair, put down his phone and said, "What do you want for breakfast? Toast or toast? Egg noodles?" Mu Nan said, "Toast, didn't there be a little bacon left yesterday?" Qin Huai said hello, got up to make breakfast, saw Mu Nan opened his mobile phone and clicked on the WeChat group, and then said, "Last night, a window was smashed in a family, and there was a newborn baby in his family. The child is gone." Mu Nan paused slightly when she swiped her phone, glanced at Qin Huai, and said oh. Qin Huai sighed silently, turned around and went into the kitchen. This kind of life filled with death every day, they need to get used to it as soon as possible. Natural Disaster Apocalypse Chapter 9. The incident of smashing the windows made many people sigh, and those who lived on the lower floors were also alerted. Many homes had a special layer of quilts and blankets nailed near the glass, for fear that some newspapers would do it again. The community group also attaches great importance to this matter. In the group, they are constantly comforting everyone and asking those who are sick at home to report to them first. They will definitely find a way to arrange the hospital as soon as possible. But no matter how much the group tried to guide them, the father who had lost his child still rushed out of the house as madly as Mu Nan remembered, and threw that kind of bone-chopping knife at the neighborhood committee. It's just that this time the neighborhood committee took precautions, closed the iron gate early, and called the police immediately, and the police came very quickly. Although they struggled hard, they still suppressed the mad father. The process did not cause casualties. Soon the residents on the lower floors could see the residents of the neighborhood committee from the windows, and posted the video to the group. Although this person is very poor, he just became a father, and his child was killed by a lunatic, but in this way the act of crazy revenge was still criticized by many people. Seeing all kinds of words in the group blaming the father, Mu Nan closed the WeChat group. No one was involved, and no one could understand the despair of others. In the evening, Mu Nan received a thank you from the community director. Mu Nan replied with a smiley emoji, expressing that this was also an accidental coincidence, and she was just being careful and making no big mistakes. The director of the community was afraid for a while, if Mu Nan hadn't posted a few videos of smashing towards the community crazily because he couldn't enter the hospital for treatment, and reminded him that there was just a smashing incident in the community, he was afraid that someone would touch him. Sensitive nerves were driven to follow the trend of the newspaper, so that the community should be vigilant, so as to avoid another tragedy. It just so happened that after watching those videos, he still had lingering fears. When he saw the father who had lost his child walking towards the community, he felt a shock in his heart, and he hurriedly let the iron gate down first. Fortunately, it was released in time. If the father waited until the door reached the door and then took out the machete and smashed the glass and charged in, it was hard to imagine how many casualties would be caused. Mu Nan is also very fortunate that the director has taken his reminder seriously. It is impossible for him to tell others directly that the child's father will come to retaliate, so he can only remind him from the side. It is best to prevent a tragedy. I remember that the current director, in the year when his parents passed away unexpectedly, was only a staff member in the community and had not yet become a director. Later, after he lived with Qin Huai's grandmother, he visited him several times, telling him that if he had any difficulties in life, he could go to the community to find him. Although the director did not die in the previous life, it is said that he was seriously injured. In the future, if the injury is serious, I am afraid that he will not be able to survive for a long time. This time he can help him avoid a catastrophe, which can be regarded as repayment. He was kind enough to help his parents take care of the funeral. Qin Huai saw Mu Nan's chat interface. Qin Huai also remembered this Director Li. He was a very kind uncle who smiled at everyone. When Mu Nan first lived in their house when he was a child, Director Li was still a staff member. He had seen it twice. At that time, he was always worried that this person would send Mu Nan back to his relatives forcibly when he saw that they were not Mu Nan's relatives. So he was somewhat repulsed by this Director Li, so he still has an impression of this Director Li. Seeing Mu Nan put down the phone, Qin Huai said, "Have you ever dreamed about this?" Mu Nan froze for a moment before nodding, looked at Qin Huai and said, "Yeah, it's not a dream, but I have a vague impression that even in the dream, I was locked in the room and couldn't get out, and then it seems that there have been a few bad things in our community, such as the smashing of the neighborhood committee. I have a little impression, so I subconsciously reminded it. I didn't expect it to be this time." Qin Huai just glanced at him, didn't say much, stretched out his arms to hug Mu Nan. He knew that Mu Nan had something to hide from him, even though they had been separated for these years, but Mu Nan was brought up by him. He knew Mu Nan well, but knowing that he knows, he has no way to ask what happened, but he just hopes that there will be a day when he and Mu Nan can return to intimacy. After being closed at home for almost a month, many people have run out of food in their homes. Just like in the previous life, the prices have risen to sky-high prices during this period, but even if the prices are sky-high, they still have to buy them, otherwise they will have nothing to eat. As for Mu Nan's two house vegetables, he also had a little harvest. His vegetables were not planted when they were seeds, but the ready-made seedlings he bought, so they grew faster, and the vegetables might take a little longer. But the peppers have grown, but because there is no sun, the growth is not very good, and now it is still green with a little yellow, and it has not turned red. Looking at the soil and vegetables in the room, Mu Nan looked at Qin Huai. "Our building seems to have a few families of lonely old people." He said this not because of how kind-hearted he is. Mu Nan still understands himself well. He has the selfishness and indifference that modern people generally have, but it is not to the extent of completely annihilating kindness. When things do not happen to him, he can ignore it indifferently, even if it happen in front of him. All he can do is not to hurt his own compassion. But he was afraid that he had so much food, a whole space of food, but when he was indifferent to those old people who might not even have any food at home, Qin Huai would feel that he was cold-blooded. So this question also meant to test Qin Huai's attitude. Qin Huai didn't think much about it. When he heard what Mu Nan said, he just frowned disapprovingly. "Sheng Mi's kindness fights against Mi's hatred. The days will become more and more difficult in the future, and you will see more and more misery by then, so Nan, I don't want you to start with this. What's more, the state order is still there. If those lonely old people really need it, the government will not leave them alone. At least now there are only people who die of illness and no one dies of starvation. Nan, if you meet someone who needs help in the future, I hope you will do what you can. Just because you have a little more vitality than others does not mean that you need to carry something heavier than life. This little vitality is also possible becoming a mortal crisis, so whether it's starvation or dying and asking for help, I hope you will always put yourself first." Before going abroad, Qin Huai may still have some innocence and kindness, but after so many years, innocence and kindness cannot allow him to survive in that cannibalistic society to this day, and the little softness and warmth he has left are all given to Mu Nan, and only for Mu Nan. Hearing what Qin Huai said, Mu Nan felt relieved. He himself experienced it once, and even died from the last trace of intolerance, so this time he was able to calm down, but unexpectedly, Qin Huai was more than what he thinks is to adapt faster, but that's good. Sometimes the most frustrating thing is not the chaos of order, nor the hopeless future, but the complicated human nature. Although the smog has lightened a bit, it has not dissipated. The country has also issued an investigation notice, saying that there is a kind of toxic mycelium in the smog that is invisible to the naked eye. Some people can rely on their own antibodies to kill this. The hyphae are wiped out, but some people are in poor health, or are young or old, or have some underlying diseases, unable to resist the toxicity of the mycelium, and this will cause lung swelling and death, but the viability of the mycelium is not high, so the infection rate is not high, but once it survives in the body, the fatality rate is extremely high, so as long as the protection is proper, the possibility of infection is very Low, although this very low possibility is accompanied by almost 100% mortality. After knowing where the source of the crisis sweeping the global epidemic is, everyone can stay at home without going out. There are not many people who dare to die to challenge their own antibodies due to the poison that can be seen everywhere outside, but people do not go out, and the food at home but it can't stand consumption. Regarding this point, the government has also begun to find a way to distribute that kind of biochemical protective clothing based on the community as a unit, and then divide the supplies so that the community can make overall arrangements. Each household can buy as much as possible for a week to half a month. The amount, and then let people in protective clothing deliver it door to door. Although this is troublesome and increases the workload of many people, it can comfort more people and avoid panic caused by food. Fortunately, most people know that the current situation is very serious, and it is not easy for the government to do this, so everyone is still cooperative. Of course, no matter when, there will always be some superstars who can't recognize the status quo. This is the time, but also pick and choose. Moonan looked at the packages of some products posted in the group. It may be for the convenience of purchasing statistics. There is no single item selection, only various packages, but the packages are not limited. Brother, do we want to buy? I have all these things in my space. The current price is several times higher than when I bought it. Qin Huai directly looked at his mobile phone, thought for a while and said, buy some, although no one may pay attention to the situation of every household, but at this time, try to follow the trend as much as possible. Moonan nodded, and made various comparisons. He chose several sets of vegetable and meat set meals. If the quality of those dishes was not good, he would crush them and add ingredients to make big buns, meat buns and vegetable buns. Moonan thought about staying at home and never going out. When the smog cleared, it would be extremely hot, and he couldn't go out, so he almost spent all his money before, and now there are only a few hundred yuan left in his phone. Yes, but a few hundred yuan is not enough to buy 2 meat sets. Fortunately, Qin Huai has money, and there is still a lot of money. Seeing the balance in Qin Huai's account, Moonan felt distressed. If I can contact you, all the money can be used. This is also a thorn in Qin Huai's heart. It's not that it's a pity for the money, but that Nan won't be alone in the past few months if he can get in touch with him. Qin Huai patted Moonan's head. Don't worry, as you said, the money will be available for at least a few months, so it won't be wasted. Moonan nodded. Although there is still some time, after the smog of the previous life cleared up overnight, it took about half a month to a month to heat up. Although the temperature rose very quickly once it heated up, there was still a little its time, but he is a little worried. Qin Huai's leftover money is not too small. By then, they will buy too much and will be targeted. He remembers that in his last life, there were reports that their countries, there are also a few wealthy overseas who donated a lot of money to invest in the aviation industry. At that time, it was a large donation. Now I think it is a bit strange. Maybe the country had already started to integrate assets at that time, prepared for future disasters. So if the purchase is too obvious at this time, Moonan doesn't know if it will be noticed. After all, in the era of big data, there are almost no secrets to speak of. Qin Huai heard his worry and said with a smile, don't worry, I know capital better than you. Even big data has loopholes to go. Don't worry, when the time comes, we will go to City B together and collect money. Come back right away. Moonan said, then why don't we just stay in City B? It's the capital after all. He will stay here, one is because this is his home, and the other is that he never left until he died, because there is a future that he knows and even experienced, so he feels more secure subconsciously. But no matter how much security there is, it doesn't seem to be as important as the capital of a country. What's more, he has waited for Qin Huai. As long as he is with Qin Huai, it doesn't matter where he is. Qin Huai shook his head, it's not suitable there. You said that you will experience extreme cold in the future. In terms of the environment, our side has an advantage. There is one more thing Qin Huai didn't say, although there may not be a distinction between locals and foreigners in the future. After all, with the population decreasing, it doesn't matter which region people are in, as long as they are alive. But for local survivors, that may not be the case. Furthermore, their cities are also first-tier cities with a population of tens of millions. Even if their homes are rebuilt, their side may not be worse than the capital of the country. Natural Disaster Apocalypse Chapter 10. After dispelling Mu Nan's idea of staying in City B, Qin Huai placed an order for the few packages he had just selected in the group, and the rest just had to wait for the volunteers to deliver them, and the community online shopping was settled. Qin Huai began to make video connections with people. The small company he founded with others needs to be sold. In addition to the shares in his hand, he also has some projects that are laying eggs. He is a software developer and the founder of the project. Although he left it as the company channel, but the company's profit only accounts for a small part. Now he wants to transfer the project and sell the shares, so many people want to buy it. Qin Huai didn't avoid Mu Nan when he operated these things. When Mu Nan knew that Qin Huai was going to pack and sell all these things in his hands to his partners, he was a little surprised. When things get messy in the future, these things won't be worth much anymore. Will he hate you? Qin Huai looked at him and understood what he meant, so he smiled and said, "You think we are friends?" Mu Nan was even more puzzled. "Aren't you a friend? If you weren't a friend, how did you start a company together?" Qin Huai said, "He is the rich second generation of Chinese. He has money and I have technology. What we have is the cooperation that we lack. We are friends when it is profitable, and we can become enemies at any time when interests conflict." Mu Nan is not an idiot who is ignorant of worldly affairs. When Qin Huai said this, he understood. Seeing that Qin Huai was bargaining with the other party without mercy, Mu Nan asked, "Then where are you, and you have good friends?" Qin Huai's hand tapping the computer paused slightly, then he raised his hand and rubbed Mu Nan's head. "I wish I could break it into 10 minutes, I don't have time to make friends, and I have you, isn't it enough?" Mu Nan was a little happy when he heard this, but also a little unhappy. He was happy that Qin Huai's world still belonged to him and was not occupied by other people. He was not happy that Qin Huai had been alone all these years, and he felt a little distressed. Without waiting for him to say anything, Qin Huai pushed him into the bathroom. "It's getting late, you go take a shower." Mu Nan snorted, took the prepared clothes and went into the bathroom. Qin Huai's smiling face gradually cooled down. He doesn't have many friends abroad. When he can be regarded as a rich second generation, he has friends around him. When he is nothing, he naturally has nothing around him. Moreover, in foreign countries, the prejudice caused by skin color it is inevitable, and even more so, discrimination from compatriots is sometimes more direct. But when it comes to friends, he used to think that he had. During those difficult days, his only way to resolve it was the news about Mu Nan passed by Jiang Xian. During the communication, he would inevitably talk about his own situation, and the contact was frequent. Plus, with the friendship he had when he was a student, he still values Jiang Xian as a friend. It's a pity that the friendship he thought was just getting closer with ulterior motives. Qin Huai wanted to sell the projects and shares in his hand. Jiang Xian, who had already joined Qin Huai company to work, naturally also learned about these things. When he knew that Qin Huai had returned home, Jiang Xian was not at peace for a moment. He even regretted it, regretted himself the innocence and stupidity of youth. At that time, he only wanted Qin Huai to stay away from Mu Nan forever. Now looking back at his childish handling at that time, it was ridiculous. What he should do is not to make Mu Nan unable to contact Qin Huai, but to become friends with Mu Nan. It's a pity that he was too young at that time, so young that he couldn't hide his malice towards Mu Nan. With that little chance, Jiang Xian contacted Qin Huai pretending nothing happened. Especially when he learned that Qin Huai was about to withdraw his shares, he was even more eager to inquire about him. No response. After dialing the well-known number again, the phone was connected, and Jiang Xian's heart skipped a beat, and then he quickly forced himself to calm down, and tried to calm down. "Qin Huai. Are you here now?" "Where?" "I haven't replied to your messages or answered your calls during this time, and now you still have to sell your shares. What happened? If there are any difficulties." Qin Huai said coldly, "Jiang Xian." Jiang Xian's heart was raised, and he even felt his voice trembling. "Huh? I am here." "Qin Huai, Nan said he looked for you." Jiang Xian had already prepared for the worst, and he had predicted countless times in his heart that when Qin Huai came to question him, what reaction and excuse would he use to respond, so when he heard Qin Huai's question, he immediately expressed surprise said, "Looked for me? How is it possible? If he has looked for me, how could I not tell you?" Qin Huai smiled on the phone, "Who do you think I will trust, you and Nan Nan?" Jiang Xian's face turned pale. "Qin Huai, what happened? Are you at home now? You wait for me to come back and we will have a face-to-face meeting. There must be some misunderstanding." Qin Huai said, "No need, and Jiang Xian, as I said before, is Nan Nan looking for you because she wants to look for me?" Jiang Xian, who was far away in City B, became completely bloodless when he heard the sound of the phone hanging up. After hanging up the phone, Qin Huai stood by the window for a while, until Mu Nan came out of the shower, put down his phone, and walked over with a smile on his face again. "Blow it with a hair dryer before coming out, it's wet, be careful of catching a cold." Mu Nan wiped it with a towel nonchalantly. "With such short hair, it will dry after a couple of strokes. Hurry up and take a shower while the water is still hot." Qin Huai didn't move, but instead took the towel from Mu Nan's hand and gently wiped his short hair. "Short hair can't be so casual, now is a special time, so you can't be sick. Come here, I'll give you a first one time." Mu Nan was dragged to the bathroom by him, and suddenly couldn't help laughing, feeling that Qin Huai was still the same Qin Huai who even cared about what socks he wore in the morning. In order to solve the problem of food and clothing for each family, this time the community delivery speed is very fast, but the speed is fast, and the quality of some items may not be so easy to guarantee. Mu Nan and his family received the items. The damage was not serious, some of the dishes were cleaned up, and the rest were pretty good, but looking at the community groups, some of the dishes received by the family were not very good, and some of the dishes were even crushed. Although this is an inevitable problem, but after spending so much money and receiving something not very good, this person always has something in his mind. Some people understand this, and they are very grateful to be able to get something to eat without going out in such a big environment, but some people are not forgiving for the problem of a la carte. Even in the group there was a commotion here. One family received bad green vegetables, so they complained to the community. What they said was not pleasant, and they didn't even communicate much, so they eagerly made all kinds of roaring voices in the group, and they didn't know it was the epidemic. The pressure of life is high, or the pressure of life is high. With this little matter of green vegetables, I wish I could vent all my dissatisfaction. The volunteers in the community were also wronged. They were working voluntarily at risk, but now they are too busy to get well. The bad food is not caused by them. In addition, the situation outside is getting more and more serious. They are busy outside. My own family was a little too concerned, some were dragging their families, and the tired family members were worried, so they made such a fuss and quit. If one quits, there will always be 2 or 3 who are affected and leave together. The community will lose a few volunteers, and the workload of others will become greater. So the family who was making trouble in the group was directly attacked by the group. At first, the family would resist and scold him back, but there were more people who scolded him. This family was kicked out. Since they are not satisfied, they will not help this family buy things in the future. In the end, that person didn't know whether he was worried that people would really ignore him, or that he was scolded too badly, but he didn't say anything in the group. Mu Nan just watched the commotion in the group silently. Don't look at how miserable many people are now scolding the family who disliked the dishes. It seems that they have spoken out for the volunteers. When the family disliked them, but a lot of people came out to agree, didn't they just want to seek their own interests through other people's troubles? Now that the reaction is so big, it is also because they are afraid that in the end they will really be beaten and no one will serve them. But the volunteers left and never came back. The community had nothing to do, and no one could be called to help at this time, so I could only ask in the group if anyone was willing to be a volunteer. Unfortunately, there were not many responses. This time I went out. It's dangerous, the weather is not considered cool, and I still wear that kind of airtight protective clothing every day, and there is no subsidy. Except for those who are really kind-hearted and want to help others, who would do such a thankless thing. Qin Huai was a little hesitant. As soon as Qin Huai hesitated, Mu Nan could tell that even though they had been apart for a long time, the tacit understanding of growing up together was still there, so he immediately stopped him. You can't go, I won't agree. Qin Huai knew what Mu Nan was worried about. In fact, he didn't want to go out and take risks. Even if he had protective clothing, who could guarantee that he wouldn't be infected by the mycelia in the smog? It is closed, and what can be learned from the internet is only part of it after all. Qin Huai said, it's safe in the building, I don't go out of the building, and now the volunteers just stay in the building to deliver some things, so it's not that dangerous. Mu Nan shook his head, do you know that people who have this disease cannot be cured? Qin Huai frowned and said, it can't be cured. Could it be that there will be problems after those who are cured? Although the mortality rate of this disease is high, it is not absolute. At least half of the cure rate is, and those who die are those who are not in good health. On the contrary, the elderly and young people are recovering very quickly, and the number of cured people is increasing every day. If it were not for this, people would not stay at home and obey the government's arrangements. Mu Nan nodded, yes, those who have recovered are only temporarily suppressed by some drugs, and then hibernate. When the virus becomes stronger and stronger in the human body, it will break out again. The infection rate of this disease is not high. Most of them were at the beginning, because the smog was not obvious, and people were infected without protection. Later, the smog became more serious, and more people wore masks, and the infection rate plummeted. Will die. Mu Nan knew that if he was wearing protective clothing, as long as he was careful not to breathe too much air outside, the chance of infection would be very low. At this time in his last life, he didn't even have many masks, and he went downstairs to get things, but he didn't come out in the end. What's up? But there is always a contingency in everything. Qin Huai never came back in the last life, that is the contingency that he dare not gamble on. He admires those who can step forward to serve the people at this time, but he dare not gamble with the people he cares about the most. He would rather be a coward who is greedy for life and afraid of death. In this life, he just wants to get along well with Qin Huai. Don't have an accident. Seeing that Mu Nan's anxious face turn pale, Qin Huai quickly said, okay, I won't go, I'll just stay at home and not go anywhere. He wanted to be a volunteer not because he was kind-hearted and wanted to help others, but because he wanted to prepare for the future. Since the power of the country has always been there, then in the troubled times in the future, he must be attached to the government. He and Nan Nan, they are all people without family background, so they can only fight on their own, but the premise is that it will not affect his and Nan Nan's own safety. After dispelling this idea, the two of them didn't mention it again, and several people in the group responded and became volunteers. Because of what happened last time, the residents in the building no longer complain strongly that it's not good, that's not good. Well, if you really want to distribute a dish that is so bad that you can't eat it, try to discuss it in a negotiable tone. Except for the still smog outside, the situation in their community was a little more harmonious for a while, but it didn't last long, because Mu Nan said before that the epidemic broke out for the second time.